If you struggle with being present in communication or you get frustrated when other people aren't present for you, this video is for you. If you've been to my channel before, welcome back. If you are new to my channel, my name is Ross and I'm an intuitive counselor. And in today's video, I want to talk about presence and listening and how we can bring some understanding to what it means to be present and what might be getting in the way of being present, and how we can manage situations in our life where we notice or observe that others aren't being present when we're communicating or sharing. And so I guess I'll start with the first part, which is why would it be that we're not present? And there can be many reasons for this, but as always, I'll start with the nervous system. And if we find that our nervous system is tuned to a state of fight, flight, or freeze, we might find that presence is difficult. And I would actually go as far as saying that it would make presence very difficult, because when we're in fight or flight, we are sensing that the world isn't safe and we're literally shutting ourselves down a bit, and we're guarded, and we might be very inward instead of outward, in a protective way. So we might be closing off parts of ourselves rather than sharing them, and we might be tuned in to other things in our environment that are creating that situation. And the other thing is that we might be unconscious of all of this. Like, we might be in a low level state of fight or flight. And one of the things that reminds me of is, I, over the years, and it's still there, it's just not as pronounced as it used to be. I worked for 25 years in restaurants, and I was always scanning the environment. I was always looking to see if customers were happy. I was always tuning into what was going on in the environment. I didn't know back then that I was doing that from a place of the impact of my emotional traumas and the impact of what I experienced growing up. And in working in the restaurant industry, that ended up being a bit of a powerful skill that I had, because I could tune into where there was a problem or where something was wrong or when a customer wasn't happy. However, in my everyday life, it would show up as a challenge, because if I was with a friend in a coffee shop, I would be trying to focus on what they were saying and at the same time kind of glancing around the coffee shop, and looking, like, every time someone come in the door, I'd kind of like glance over to the door. And I still do that to some extent, and I'm definitely more conscious of it. And but it is about, being safe in my body. It's like, what is entered into my environment? Am I going to be in a sense of danger? And the point of all of this is that it impacts our ability to be present. It impacts our ability to, first off, be present with ourselves, because we can't really turn inwards as much in a positive, nurturing, supportive way. And we're always oriented outward to our environment. And it can be very hard to focus on the person in front of us and give them the attention that they deserve. So that's kind of some pieces around why it can be hard to be present. The other piece is, what can we do in order to bring presence, and not just presence for others, but presence for ourselves? And really, that comes back to all the self-care practices, whether it's meditation, whether it's just focusing on our breath, whether it's practicing being in silence. All of these experiences can be really challenging at first to actually do, but meditation is about finding that gap between our thoughts. Meditation is all about cultivating presence. It's not so much about the silence and experiencing silence, because we have thoughts. We need to be balanced with those thoughts. And so nervous system regulation, or practices that bring us into the present moment, all help us to be present, to be right here, to be right now, present with the person that is in front of us, and more importantly, present with ourselves. Because when we're present with ourselves, we can notice what's going on in our body, we can notice what's going on in our thoughts, we can notice what we're experiencing in our environment. And so having a daily practice of some kind of self-care. And I know that this can be challenging when we're used to being in fight or flight. So it takes some time to create this and stick with it. But all of that is going to translate into being more present in our relationships and being more present for ourselves. And that takes time. Unfortunately, like everything else I talk about, it takes time to cultivate that. It takes intention, it takes commitment. And it's kind of a dual piece, right? Because we also need to do some work around what is it that's causing these feelings? Like, why am I distracted? Why am I in fight or flight? What is driving that experience so that I'm not present? And if we don't look at those things, then those kind of influences or experiences are going to be under the surface, undermining all the work that we're doing. So it's kind of like we need to look at both. The other piece that I wanted to talk about in this video was this idea of what do we do when we realize that someone that we're talking to isn't present or isn't hearing us or isn't taking in the words that we're saying. And unfortunately, this comes back to self-responsibility, and we can't, like, I'll look at myself, for example. If I think of earlier in my journey, like I have a story of rejection, this story of that people aren't gonna be there for me, that they're going to reject me. And so that would show up in small ways in my communications. And so I would notice when someone was checked out. Like I would notice when they weren't really listening to me. And the thing is that we live in a busy world. We live in a world that is demanding much of us. And we also live in a world where, unfortunately, like, being on our phones and talking to someone else is like a common experience. And the thing about that is that we need to speak up for what we want. We need to use our voice. We need to let people know what's going on. And this is another complicated kind of tangent because I think, and if I reflect on my own experiences as I say this, there's lots of times where I thought I was being crystal clear with what I was saying and what I was trying to convey, only to learn that I was completely misunderstood and that I ultimately wasn't clear in what I was asking. And it wasn't until later that that surfaced. And so that requires all sorts of tools around checking in and speaking our truth and sharing our observations and managing our triggers around how we're sharing something. But ultimately, it comes down to asking for what we want, for letting the person know that we're interacting with that we feel that lack of presence. And of course, we're going to say that in a kind, supportive way. And most of the time, I believe that when we share that with someone, when we speak our truth, there's going to be an adjustment and a sort of like an awareness that wakes up within that person and a desire to adjust that behavior or at least bring awareness to it and say, hey, I'm really sorry. I didn't realize that I was doing that. I didn't realize that I was distracted by this project that I'm working on that has a deadline, and I would love to give you my presence. The other thing is that sometimes it's just not the right time. And so sometimes we need to negotiate. It's like, when would a time be that I can have your presence? When would it work that I can have your full attention? Can we schedule a time? And that can be a piece of the puzzle as well. And as I'm talking about all this, I realize that there's a lot of intricacy and many layers to what I'm talking about. But these videos are always about giving an overview of a topic and inspiring some sort of thought within you. And if there's something that comes up that you want further questions, you can totally put those questions in the comments, and I'd be happy to respond to those. So I think I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch, and hopefully you were listening with presence. And I have kept you kept you captivated during the whole video. If you enjoyed this video, please consider sharing it with someone else. If you're interested in the work that I do as an intuitive counselor, you can find out more about me by going to the description and going to my website. And I look forward to connecting with you and sharing with you in future videos and sending you unconditional love. Bye for now.